Hello, welcome back and thank you for watching Betrayed Husbands Club. We appreciate each and every one of you. We'd like to know. Chapter 1, The Quiet Storm. The sound of clinking dishes filled the small kitchen as Tom Baker's rough hands worked through the soapy water. Each plate he cleaned came out spotless, reflecting his attention to detail. At his feet, his old dog, Buster, snored gently, while the soft hum of his wife Eleanor drifted in from the living room. "Honey, did you remember to call the plumber about the bathroom sink?" Eleanor's voice had a hint of something Tom couldn't quite put his finger on. "Already took care of it," Tom replied, drying his hands. "He'll be here tomorrow morning." Eleanor stepped into the doorway, her slender figure leaning against the wooden frame. Her auburn hair tumbled down past her shoulders, and her designer blouse likely cost more than the entire contents of Tom's closet. "Oh, I thought you were working tomorrow." "Took the morning off," Tom said casually. "I figured I'd be here when he shows up." He watched her closely, noting the slight tightening of her expression. "You didn't have to do that. I could have handled it," she said, tapping her fingers against her thigh. "I'm working from home tomorrow anyway." Tom shrugged, maintaining his facade of a simple, content construction worker. "No trouble. Besides, you know how these guys can jack up the price if they think no one's paying attention." A weight settled in Tom's chest. 8 years as a Marine sniper hadn't just taught him how to shoot, it had taught him to read people, to notice every small detail that might betray their thoughts. His 5 years with the CIA had only sharpened those skills. "Speaking of work," Eleanor continued, "Trevor's been pushing us all pretty hard lately. He's expecting record sales this quarter." She walked over to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of wine. Tom wiped another plate, each movement slow and deliberate. Trevor. Just hearing his name made Tom's jaw tighten. Eleanor's boss at the real estate agency had been cropping up in their conversations a lot lately. "Is that so?" Tom kept his tone neutral. "I thought you said he was a pain last month?" Eleanor poured herself a generous glass of red. "Oh, he can be, but he knows what he's doing. The new commission structure could really change things for us." Us. Tom remembered when that word used to mean something else. When they'd first met at that barbecue 3 years ago, Eleanor had been drawn to his steady presence, his quiet strength. He'd been captivated by her ambition, her energy. Now, that same ambition felt different, heavier. "Want a glass?" Eleanor offered, holding the bottle up. Tom shook his head. "Got an early start tomorrow." He needed to stay sharp, keep his mind clear. The conversation stalled as Eleanor retreated to the living room, her phone already in hand. Tom heard the faint tap of her fingers on the screen, followed by the quiet click of their bedroom door. He finished the dishes, each movement controlled and precise. The radio in the kitchen played softly, masking any sounds from the bedroom, but Tom didn't need to hear. His instincts, honed over years of training, told him something was wrong. Moving quietly, he made his way to the living room. On the coffee table lay his old phone, seemingly innocent but rigged with specialized listening equipment he'd installed weeks ago. The nagging feeling in his gut had driven him to take these precautions, to prepare for something he hadn't wanted to believe possible. He slipped in the earphones, and Eleanor's voice came through clearly, though muffled and low. "Baby, this idiot doesn't suspect a thing," she said. Her words cut through him like a knife. "Send your hitmen tomorrow. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." The blood in Tom's veins turned to ice. Trevor's voice followed, smooth and confident. "Don't worry, beautiful. By this time tomorrow, you'll be a grieving widow, and we can finally be together the way we should. Just make sure it's clean." Eleanor's response was cold and businesslike. "I don't want any complications. My guys are professionals," Trevor reassured her. "They'll make it quick, and the insurance payout will set us up nicely. You've done well, baby. Just keep playing your part for one more night." Tom yanked the earphones out, his face set in a mask of cold fury. The love he once felt for Eleanor transformed into something harder, darker. He pulled out a secure phone, one she didn't know about, and sent a message to a number he hadn't dialed in months. Need equipment. Tomorrow. Life insurance scenario. The reply came quickly. Understood. Location? Usual spot. 0600. Tom deleted the messages and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He walked back to the kitchen, where Buster raised his head, giving him a curious look. Come on, boy, Tom whispered, tapping his leg. Let's get some air. The dog followed him out into the backyard. Tom entered his shed and flicked on the small light. Behind his workbench, hidden under a false panel, lay the tools of his former trade. His fingers brushed over the case holding his modified M40A6 sniper rifle. Beside it sat various pieces of electronic surveillance equipment, communication jammers, and other specialized gear he had kept, just in case. You okay, honey? Eleanor's voice called from the back door. It's getting late. Tom stepped out of the shed, his face showing only a mild, neutral expression. Just checking on my tools for tomorrow's project. The lie rolled off his tongue easily, naturally. Eleanor smiled, and Tom couldn't help but marvel at how genuine it seemed. Don't stay up too late. You need your rest. Of course, dear. He watched her disappear back inside, his mind already working through the plan for tomorrow. She wanted a grieving widow? He'd show her something much different. The night air was thick with the scent of jasmine from Eleanor's garden. Tom remembered planting those bushes with her last spring. He could still hear her laugh when he got dirt on his nose. But now, the memory didn't stir any emotion. What replaced it was a cold, calculating focus that hadn't surfaced since his last CIA operation. Tomorrow, Eleanor and Trevor would understand what it really meant to betray someone like him. Not the construction worker they thought they knew, but the predator they had foolishly awakened. Chapter 2: The Web of Deception. The small shed at the back of Tom's property had always been his sanctuary, but tonight it became his war room. The smell of metal and gun oil filled the space, familiar scents that brought back memories of past missions. He pulled out his old sniper rifle, the weight of it comforting in his hands as he began the careful process of cleaning it. You remember this, don't you, Buster? Tom murmured to the dog, who was watching him intently from the corner. From before we played civilian. His mind wandered to the first time he met Eleanor, 3 years ago, at a summer barbecue. Laughter and the smell of grilled meat had filled the air. Tom had been standing off to the side, nursing a beer, when she approached him. You look like you're planning an escape route, Eleanor had said, flashing a bright smile. Tom had chuckled. Force of habit. Though I'm just a construction worker these days. Just? She raised an eyebrow. There's nothing just about building things that last. Her hand had brushed his arm, sending an unexpected jolt through him. I'm Eleanor. I sell the things you build. Tom Baker. He'd studied her then, noticed the designer watch, the perfectly manicured nails, the hungry look in her eyes, which he'd mistaken for ambition instead of greed. Tom set the cleaned rifle down and moved to a locked cabinet in the corner. Inside were various electronic devices, each carefully maintained. He picked out several motion sensors and a sophisticated communication jammer. Should have seen it sooner, boy, he muttered to Buster, who wagged his tail. The signs were all there. Tom pulled out his secure phone again and dialed a number. Mateo speaking. The voice on the other end was alert, despite the late hour. It's Baker. Need your expertise tomorrow afternoon. The kind that leaves no trace? A low whistle came through the speaker. Must be serious if you're calling this line. What's the scenario? Wife and her lover hired hitmen. Need to make sure their digital footprint disappears when I'm done. Shit, man. Mateo paused. Eleanor? The real estate agent? The same. Tom's voice remained calm, but his grip on the phone tightened. Need everything. Their communications, financials, the whole package. Then I need it all to vanish at the right moment. Consider it done. You handling the physical side? Already in motion. Meet me at Joey's Diner, 1,400 hours tomorrow. I'll have more details then. After hanging up, Tom got back to work. He opened several more cases, each containing tools that would turn his suburban home into a battleground. Not for him. For the hitmen who thought they were walking into an easy job. As he moved through his tasks, his thoughts kept returning to Eleanor's recent behavior. The late-night phone calls she thought he couldn't hear. The subtle shifts in her routine. The way she'd started dressing more expensively, claiming it was necessary for her work image. Tom had let her believe he was oblivious, playing the role of the trusting husband while his suspicions grew. He'd started tracking everything weeks ago, his training kicking in as patterns began to emerge. The frequent meetings with Trevor. The nervous tension when Tom came home unexpectedly. The careful questions about his schedule. He pulled out a small notebook and began writing, his handwriting precise and controlled. Security measures. Motion sensors at all entry points. Communication jammer to isolate targets. Surveillance cameras with remote access. Backup power supply for all systems. Remote-triggered lockdown protocols. Equipment required. Combat knife. 2. Zip ties. Taser. Smoke grenades. Non-lethal. First aid kit. For questioning. The list continued, each item picked for a specific purpose. Tom wasn't just planning to survive tomorrow. He was planning to dismantle the entire operation. He glanced at his watch. 0200 hours. Plenty of time to finish preparations and still keep his cover. Eleanor would expect him in bed soon, playing the unsuspecting husband one last time. Tom packed everything away, ensuring his equipment was ready for quick use. As he stood up, his hand brushed against an old photograph tucked away in one of the cases. It showed him in his Marine dress uniform, receiving a commendation. The man in that photo had been direct, ruthless when necessary, untouched by civilian softness. "Time to remember who you are," he muttered, tucking the photo away. Buster followed him as he locked up the shed and headed back to the house. Through the kitchen window, he saw Eleanor in her nightgown, making a cup of tea. Her movements were calm, confident. She had no idea her plan was about to fall apart. Tom entered through the back door, keeping his usual calm demeanor. "Sorry, lost track of time out there." Eleanor turned, her smile perfectly practiced. "I made you some tea. Chamomile. Helps you sleep." "Thanks, honey." He took the cup. "Not drinking? You heading to bed?" "In a minute. Just need to check one last email from Trevor about tomorrow's listings." Tom nodded, watching her tap away on her phone. Every gesture, every little lie, was filed away in his mind. Tomorrow, she would learn what it truly costs to betray him. Tonight, he'd play his part one last time. He set the untouched tea aside when she wasn't looking and headed upstairs. In their bedroom, he went through his usual routine, all while his mind calculated angles, timing, and contingencies. The hitman would come, expecting an easy target. Instead, they'd find a predator waiting in his own hunting grounds. As he lay in bed, Eleanor curled up beside him as she always did. Tom allowed himself one final thought of what might have been, then locked those feelings away, replacing them with the cold focus he'd need tomorrow. The woman beside him was no longer his wife. She was just another target in his sights. Chapter 3: The Game Begins. The construction site hummed with activity as Tom worked alongside his crew. His movements were precise and controlled, despite the weight of the steel beam they were positioning. Sweat dripped down his back, but his mind stayed sharp, focusing on every detail of his plan. "Baker!" his foreman called out. "Got a minute?" Tom secured his end of the beam and walked over, wiping his hands on his work pants. "What's up, Mike?" "Got a call from your wife earlier," Mike said, his face tightening with concern. "She said she's been trying to reach you. Everything okay?" "Phone's acting up," Tom lied smoothly. "I'll check in with her at lunch." He knew exactly why Eleanor was calling. She wanted to confirm his schedule, make sure he'd be home at the right time for her planned robbery. The thought made his jaw tighten, but his face remained neutral. At exactly 1,400 hours, Tom pulled into the parking lot of Joey's diner. The small, faded building sat on the outskirts of town, its worn exterior perfect for private meetings that needed to stay under the radar. Mateo was already inside, occupying a booth in the back corner. The tech specialist looked the same, thin, with anxious energy barely hidden behind a facade of casual indifference. "You look like shit," Mateo said as Tom slid into the booth. "Save it." Tom pulled a USB drive from his jacket and placed it on the table. "I need everything on here analyzed and ready by tonight. Focus on financial transactions between Trevor Morrison and any suspicious offshore accounts," Tom added. Mateo picked up the drive, his fingers tapping lightly over it. "You know this is going to cost extra, right? Rush job, high-risk target. Money's not an issue." Tom's voice was flat. "Trevor's accounts will more than cover it." The waitress approached, but one glance at Tom's expression made her hesitate. Without taking their order, she quickly retreated. "Talk me through what you've got so far," Mateo said, leaning in. Tom pulled out his phone, showing Mateo a series of surveillance photos. "Trevor's been meeting with these 3 men regularly over the last month. I need their communications monitored and their movements tracked. When everything goes down, I want them completely isolated." "Jesus, Tom," Mateo whistled low. "You're not just looking to survive this, are you? You're going to destroy them. They made their choice." Tom's voice had an edge that made Mateo shift in his seat. "Now they deal with the consequences." For the next hour, they went over the technical details. Mateo occasionally chimed in with suggestions, filling in gaps Tom hadn't thought of. "The jamming device will need to be calibrated carefully," Mateo explained, sketching on a napkin. "Too strong, and it'll affect your own equipment. Too weak, and they might still get a signal out. Can you handle it?" Mateo nodded. "I'll have it ready in 3 hours." "But Tom?" He hesitated before continuing. "What about Eleanor? She's not just some target. You loved her." Tom's expression hardened. "Love is for civilians." She chose her side. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Tom briefly returned to work, keeping up his cover, then made a show of leaving early, claiming a headache. His crew wished him well, none of them suspecting that their quiet, reliable coworker was preparing for war. At home, Tom moved with practiced efficiency. He placed motion sensors at strategic points throughout the house, each one connected to a central monitoring system in his shed. Next came the cameras, hidden in plain sight. One tucked inside a smoke detector, another inside a wall clock, and 3 more cleverly disguised as electrical outlets. His phone buzzed. "Eleanor." "Hey, honey." Her voice dripped with concern. "Heard you weren't feeling well. Want me to pick up some soup on my way home?" "That would be great," Tom replied, letting just the right amount of discomfort creep into his voice. "Might turn in early tonight." "Poor baby," she said sweetly. "I'll take care of you." The call ended, and Tom allowed himself a grim smile. She really thought she had him completely fooled. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mateo. "Equipment ready. Package contains extra surprises. Don't open the red case until you need it." Tom retrieved the package from their agreed drop point, a storage locker at the local gym. Inside, he found everything he requested, and a few extra additions that made him raise an eyebrow. Mateo had certainly gone above and beyond. The red case contained a sophisticated audio surveillance system, far more advanced than what Tom had anticipated. He carried everything to his truck with casual ease, unfazed by the lethal cargo. Back home, Tom resumed his preparations. He installed the new equipment seamlessly, each piece enhancing his carefully laid trap. The house that Eleanor thought would be his final resting place was transforming into a fortress. His phone buzzed with another message from her. "Picking up soup now. Need anything else?" "Just you," he replied, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. While waiting for Eleanor's return, Tom ran one final check on his preparations. The motion sensors were active, silently feeding their signals to his modified phone. The cameras streamed directly to both his shed's monitoring system and a secure cloud server that Mateo had set up. The jammers were in position, ready to create a dead zone whenever Tom needed. The sound of Eleanor's car pulling into the driveway snapped him back to attention. He quickly moved to the couch, arranging himself to appear suitably under the weather. "Honey, I'm home," Eleanor called out, her heels clicking against the floor. "I got you that chicken soup you like," she added, bustling around the kitchen, playing the role of the caring wife to perfection. Her phone buzzed, and she checked it with what she thought was subtle discretion. "Trevor's being impossible again," she sighed, setting the soup down. "He wants updated listings by tomorrow morning. Can it wait?" Tom noted how she tensed at the question but kept his tone neutral. "You've been working too hard lately." Eleanor laughed, perfect in its practiced ease. "That's sweet. But you know how real estate is. Always on call." She kissed his forehead. "Why don't you eat your soup and get some rest? I'll handle some emails and the study." Tom made a show of eating the soup slowly while Eleanor disappeared into the study. Through his phone, he could see her typing furiously on her laptop, no doubt coordinating tomorrow's attack with Trevor. The hours dragged on. Tom kept up his sick act, coughing occasionally or shifting uncomfortably on the couch. Eleanor played her part just as convincingly, checking on him periodically with genuine concern. "I think I'll turn in early," Tom announced around 9, deliberately roughening his voice. "Don't stay up too late," Eleanor said softly. "I won't," Tom promised, watching her disappear into the study again. In their bedroom, Tom lay awake, listening to Eleanor's movements downstairs. Through his earpiece, he overheard her conversation with Trevor. "Everything's set," she whispered. "He's sick. He'll be sleeping heavily tomorrow. Your guys know what to do." "All arranged, baby," Trevor's smooth voice replied. "This time tomorrow, you'll be a wealthy widow. The insurance company won't suspect a thing." Tom closed his eyes, not to sleep but to concentrate. He ran through his plan one final time, checking for any weaknesses or oversights. Everything was in place. Tomorrow, Eleanor and Trevor would learn exactly who they were up against. The bed dipped as Eleanor finally joined him, snuggling close. Her betrayal tasted more bitter now, in the intimacy of that gesture. "Feeling any better?" she whispered. "Getting there," he murmured, playing his part one last time. As Eleanor's breathing deepened and she drifted to sleep, Tom remained alert. In his mind, he was no longer Thomas Baker, the loving husband and construction worker. He was the hunter, trained and tested, the predator who'd survived countless missions behind enemy lines. Tomorrow would bring violence and revelation. Tonight, he waited, patient and deadly, like a snake coiled in Eleanor's carefully tended garden. She and Trevor thought they were orchestrating his end. Instead, they had sealed their own fate. The night stretched on, marked only by Eleanor's peaceful breathing and the occasional rustle as she shifted in her sleep. Tom remained still, conserving his energy, his mind sharp and focused on the coming conflict. They wanted a grieving widow and a clean insurance payout. They would get neither. Chapter 4: The bait is set. Tom moved through his morning routine, every muscle coiled with anticipation beneath his calm exterior. The soft hum of the kitchen radio filled the space as he prepared breakfast, bacon sizzling in the pan while Eleanor sipped her coffee. "You're up early for someone who's feeling sick," Eleanor remarked, tapping her manicured nails against her phone screen. "Couldn't sleep well," Tom replied, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. "Thought I might as well make breakfast." Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, attempting to mask her excitement. "Trevor's really pushing for these morning showings. I should head out soon." "Be safe out there," Tom said, watching her collect her things. "Heard there've been some break-ins in the neighborhood." Eleanor paused for a fraction of a second, her hand tightening on her purse strap. "Oh? I hadn't heard that. Just something Mike mentioned at work." Tom leaned in to kiss her cheek, noting how she tensed slightly at his touch. "Have a good day, honey." The moment Eleanor's car disappeared down the street, Tom's gentle expression hardened into steel. He activated the surveillance system, watching through his phone as she pulled into a parking lot 2 blocks away. She made a call. "It's done." Her voice came through clearly. "He's homesick, completely clueless. Your boys can move in whenever they're ready." Trevor's smooth voice responded. "Perfect. Baby, the team will be there in 20 minutes. Remember to act surprised when you get the call. The grieving widow routine needs to be convincing." He added, "Don't worry about me." Eleanor laughed. "I've been practicing my tears in the mirror." Tom switched off the audio, his jaw clenched tight. He moved to his shed, where his equipment was ready. The listening devices were active throughout the house. Motion sensors primed at all entry points. He pulled up the feed from the street camera he'd installed last week and saw a black SUV make its 3rd pass of the morning. His phone buzzed. It was Matteo. "They're using a pretty basic communication setup," Matteo reported. "Standard encrypted channels, nothing fancy. The jammer will knock them out cold." "Good. Keep monitoring Trevor's phone. I want to know the moment he realizes something's wrong." "Already on it." "But Tom? These guys they're sending? Not amateurs." I pulled their files. Ex-military. Dishonorable discharges. They've done this before." Tom's lips curled into a cold smile. "Good. Then they should appreciate what's coming." Through the cameras, Tom saw the SUV finally pull up. 3 men stepped out, the leader tattooed and bulky, exuding a military presence. The other 2 were leaner but just as dangerous. The leader's voice boomed as he approached the front door, followed by a powerful kick that splintered the wood. Tom activated the jammers. On his screen, the leader tapped his earpiece in confusion. The man tried his phone next. "Static. Comms are down," he muttered. "Stick to the plan. Find him." The leader growled. "Make it quick," one of the men added. They spread out, weapons drawn. Tom watched them move through his house, their confidence growing as they found each room empty. He triggered the first trap, a high-frequency sonic pulse. The leader staggered, clutching his head. "What the hell was that?" one of the men demanded. "Keep moving," the leader ordered, shaking off the disorientation. "He's got to be here somewhere." Tom switched views between the cameras, watching them search. They were good, checking corners, moving fast, but they were fighting blind, while he had a perfect view. The leader reached the kitchen, signaling for his men to check upstairs. Perfect. Tom triggered the smart locks, sealing the heavy security doors he'd installed weeks ago. The sound of doors slamming echoed through the house, making all 3 men jump. "Locked in," one of the men shouted from upstairs. The leader pulled out his phone again, desperation creeping into his movements. "Something's wrong." "This isn't." His words were cut off as Tom triggered the lights, plunging the house into complete darkness. The emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "Forget the plan," the leader barked. "Find him and finish this." Tom moved silently through his custom-built passages behind the walls, tracking the men's infrared signatures on his tactical display. The leader was alone in the kitchen now, sweeping his weapon back and forth. Tom hit the sonic emitter again, this time at a higher frequency. The leader dropped to one knee, clutching his head in disorientation. Tom emerged from a hidden panel with swift, brutal precision. The leader never saw the taser coming. Upstairs, the other 2 men heard their leader's muffled grunt. "Marcus? You okay down there?" Silence. Tom dragged the unconscious leader to the basement, securing him with zip ties. 1 down, 2 to go. The remaining men moved in sync, their training evident despite their rising panic. Tom triggered another set of lights, creating shifting shadows that captured their attention. "This isn't right," one of them whispered. "We're being hunted." "Shut up. Just find him." Tom took position in his next hiding spot, watching them through the walls. Their heart rates spiked, clearly visible on his thermal imaging. Fear was making them sloppy. He triggered a pre-recorded sound of footsteps, drawing them toward the master bedroom. As they entered, he sealed the door behind them. "It's a trap." The ventilation system hissed, releasing a mild sedative gas. The men fired blindly, their shots embedding harmlessly into the reinforced walls. Within minutes, they slumped to the floor. Tom waited for the gas to clear, then entered wearing his tactical mask. He secured both men, dragging them one by one to the basement with their leader. In his shed, Tom checked the monitors, watching Eleanor arrive at her first showing of the day. Her phone rang. It was Trevor. The team's not responding. His voice was tight with concern. Something's wrong. What do you mean, something's wrong? Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. They're professionals, you said. I'm heading over there myself. No. Eleanor's voice rose. Stick to the plan. They'll call when it's done. Tom smiled as he checked the feed from the basement. His 3 guests were beginning to stir. It was time for the next phase. He activated the basement cameras and audio system. Marcus groaned, struggling to focus his eyes in the dim light. Welcome back. Tom's voice echoed through hidden speakers. Let's talk about Trevor Morrison, shall we? Chapter 5. The Harvest Begins. The air in the basement grew thick with tension as Tom faced his captives. Marcus, the leader, tested his restraints, while his men exchanged nervous glances. You picked the wrong house, Tom said, his voice carrying the cold authority of his Marine days. The wrong target. The wrong job. Look, man, Marcus began, his tough guy facade cracking. This is just business. Nothing personal. Tom responded, his fist connecting with Marcus's jaw, cutting off his words. Attempting to murder me for my wife and her lover? Feels pretty personal to me. The other 2 men stiffened at this revelation. Tom noticed their reaction. Ah, he said, circling them slowly. They didn't tell you that part, did they? Just told you it was a simple hit disguised as a robbery? Let me guess, Trevor promised you each what? 50,000? 100? One of the men, younger and more nervous than the others, swallowed hard. How do you? He started, but Marcus quickly snapped. Shut up, Dave. Dave was right to be worried, Tom continued, stopping in front of them. Because right now, Trevor's realizing something's wrong. He's probably calling in backup, making plans to disappear before this all goes south. Tom leaned closer to Marcus. But we both know he won't pay for failed jobs, will he? Marcus's face darkened. You don't know Trevor. I know he's hired you before, Tom said coldly. 3 jobs in the last year. All successful, until now. Let me know if you'd like further changes or if you'd like to continue. Tom pulled out his phone, showing them several documents. I know about the Newman job. The Richardson case. The accident at the marina. The 3rd man, who had been silent up until now, cursed under his breath. Here's what happens next. Tom continued. Trevor's going to come looking for you. And when he does, he'll find exactly what I want him to find. Tom picked up a camera. You're going to help me send him a message. We're not saying anything, Marcus growled. Tom's laugh was cold, completely void of humor. You misunderstand. You don't need to say anything. Your faces will do all the talking. He activated the camera, broadcasting directly to Trevor's office computer through Mateo's backdoor. The feed displayed 3 professional killers, beaten and bound, fear evident in their eyes. Trevor, I know you're watching, Tom said to the camera. You thought you were buying my death. He paused, watching the tension grow. Instead, you bought front-row seats to your own destruction. Keep watching. He turned back to his captives. Now, about those other jobs. Hours passed as Tom systematically wore them down. He didn't need to use torture or excessive violence. He had leverage, patience, and the experience of a trained interrogator. Dave was the first to crack, spilling details about Trevor's operation. Soon, Tony followed suit. Marcus held out longer, but even he cracked when Tom played recordings of Trevor already working to pin everything on them. That snake, Marcus spat. We did everything he asked, and now he's selling us out? Tom nodded grimly. He's making calls to his contacts in the police department, painting you as rogue operators who tried to extort him. By tomorrow, you'll be his scapegoats. What do you want from us? Tony asked, the defeat in his voice palpable. Everything, Tom replied. Names, dates, details, every job Trevor's commissioned, every payoff, every contact. Tom held up a digital recorder. Consider it your insurance policy. As they spoke, Tom's phone lit up with messages from Mateo. Trevor's freaking out. Called 6 different numbers in the last hour. Tried to access his offshore accounts. Already locked him out. Tom sent back. He's making mistakes. Keep monitoring. Phase 2 starts soon. To his captives, Tom said. Comfortable? Good. Because we're about to put on a show that'll tear Trevor's world apart. He set up additional cameras, positioning them carefully. Your confessions are going live soon. But first, let's make sure Trevor and Eleanor understand exactly what they've done. Tom pulled up the surveillance feed from his house on a monitor. Eleanor had returned, pacing nervously in the living room, phone pressed to her ear. Trevor's not answering. She was saying to someone. Something's wrong. The team should have called hours ago. Tom smiled coldly. Watch this, he told his captives. He pressed a button, and Eleanor's phone rang. Hello? Her voice was shaky. Check your email, Tom said, using a voice modulator. Eleanor rushed to her laptop, her face draining of color as she opened the file. On the screen was video footage of her conversation with Trevor about the hit, followed by clips of her practicing the grieving widow act in their bathroom mirror. Who is this? What do you want? Eleanor demanded, panic creeping into her voice. Justice, Tom replied. Tell Trevor to check his company's website in 1 hour. The truth is coming out. He ended the call, turning back to his captives. And now, gentlemen, you're going to help me destroy Trevor Morrison's entire world. Chapter 6. The Exposure. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon when Tom initiated the final phase of his plan. In the basement, his 3 captives sat before the camera, their confessions recorded and ready for broadcast. Above, Eleanor frantically tried to reach Trevor, unaware that her husband was orchestrating their downfall from below. It's time, Tom announced, checking his monitors. Trevor's company website was experiencing unusually high traffic. Mateo's work, he said, ensuring maximum exposure. Ready for your moment of fame? Marcus glared but remained silent. Dave and Tony just looked resigned. Tom activated the broadcast, hijacking Trevor's company website. The professional corporate homepage dissolved into a live feed of the basement. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom began, his voice altered by the modulator. What you're about to see is the truth behind Trevor Morrison's real estate empire. These men were hired to commit murder this morning. Instead, they're going to tell you about all the other crimes they've committed for Mr. Morrison. He played the recordings, hours of detailed confessions about mortgage fraud, intimidation, and worse. The viewer count climbed rapidly as Mateo ensured the feed spread across social media. Tom's phone buzzed. It was Trevor calling Eleanor. What the hell is happening? Trevor's smooth voice was frantic now. The office is going crazy. Clients are calling. The board is demanding answers. I don't know. Eleanor's panic became evident. He knows. Trevor. Whoever this is, they know everything. Shut up. I'm coming over. Don't talk to anyone. Tom switched to the street cameras, watching Trevor's Mercedes speed toward the house. Perfect, he muttered, turning to his captives. Your boss is coming. He smiled coldly. Let's make sure he gets a proper welcome. Tom triggered the next video sequence, security footage showing Trevor meeting with the hit team, handing over envelopes of cash, discussing jobs that needed solving. The basement door opened, and Tom melted into the shadows as Trevor's footsteps pounded down the stairs. What the fuck is going on? Marcus? Dave? Trevor froze at the sight of his men, bound and beaten. Hello, Trevor, Tom said, his voice now natural, as recognition and fear flooded Trevor's face. Baker? But how? Surprised to see the man you tried to have killed? Tom stepped forward, savoring Trevor's instinctive step backward. Did you really think I was just a simple construction worker? Trevor's hand moved toward his jacket. Tom had him pinned against the wall before he could even reach his gun. 8 years as a Marine sniper, Tom said conversationally. 5 years with the CIA. But you didn't do your homework, did you? Too busy seducing my wife and planning my murder. Listen. Trevor's voice turned pleading. We can work something out. Money? I can pay. Tom disarmed him with practiced ease, zip-tying his hands. I don't want your money, he said coolly. I want your destruction. And guess what? It's already happening. He turned Trevor to face the monitors showing his company's website. The comments and shares were exploding. News vans were pulling up outside the office. No, Trevor whispered, his voice cracking. No, no, no. Yes, Tom said, his tone cold. He positioned Trevor in front of the camera. Your turn for a confession. I won't, Trevor hissed. You will, Tom countered, leaning in. Because if you don't, these three will tell the police about all your other projects, including the ones your family doesn't know about. Trevor's resistance crumbled as Tom laid out the evidence. Years of illegal dealings, all documented and ready to be released. You can confess now, Tom offered. Take a plea deal later. Maybe see daylight again in 20 years. Or stay silent. And I release everything. Tom added. Your choice. Trevor spoke. He spilled everything. The murder plot, Eleanor's involvement, years of corruption and crime. The viewer count hit 6 figures as he implicated business partners, corrupt officials, and other conspirators. When the police finally arrived, drawn by anonymous tips about a disturbance, they found a treasure trove of evidence. 4 men tied up in a basement. Recordings of multiple crimes. A dead man's switch ensuring everything would go public if anyone tried to bury it. Tom met them at the door, playing the shocked homeowner who defended himself from robbers. He gave his statement, provided the security footage of the break-in, and declined to press charges. The other evidence was more than enough. Eleanor arrived just as the police were leading Trevor and his men away. She stood on the front lawn, watching the future she'd so carefully constructed begin to collapse. Mrs. Baker? An officer approached her. We have some questions about your involvement with Mr. Morrison. Tom had already left, slipping away as reporters swarmed in. He carried with him a simple note in his pocket. I know and you will see. He drove to Mateo's place, where they would monitor the aftermath of their plan. Through the screens, they watched Trevor's world fall apart. Check this out, Mateo said, pointing at a monitor. Trevor's company stock is plummeting. The board's calling emergency meetings. And his family's distancing themselves already. Tom added, his eyes fixed on the chaos. What about Eleanor? Police are questioning her now, Mateo said, pulling up a video feed from the station. She's trying to play innocent, but those recordings aren't leaving her much room to wiggle. Through the feed, they could see Eleanor's composure slipping as detectives played back her conversations with Trevor. Her flawless clothes and makeup couldn't mask the panic starting to show. I want a new identity, Tom said, his voice firm. Something that'll let me disappear when this is over. Mateo raised an eyebrow. You're not sticking around to see them go down? I've set the trap, Tom replied. Now I just need to make sure they can't escape it. Tom pulled out a USB drive. This contains everything. Complete records of Trevor's operations, Eleanor's involvement, everything. Release it to the media if anything happens to me. You think they'll try something? Mateo asked. Trevor has connections we don't know about. Better safe than sorry. Tom checked his watch. Keep monitoring. I've got one last stop to make. He drove back to his house, now quiet after the chaos of the morning. Police tape marked the broken door. Inside, evidence markers dotted the rooms where his traps had gone off. Tom moved through the house, gathering specific items, photographs, documents, recordings, that would ensure Trevor and Eleanor's convictions. He took nothing personal, nothing that would hint at sentiment. His phone buzzed with news alerts. Real estate mogul Trevor Morrison arrested in murder-for-hire plot. Prominent realtor Eleanor Baker implicated in husband's attempted murder. Morrison family empire faces investigation following shocking revelation. The plan was working perfectly. Trevor's confession had triggered a flood of investigations. His business partners were scrambling to protect themselves, offering up more evidence of his crimes. Eleanor's carefully crafted public image was crumbling as clients and colleagues learned of her betrayal. Tom made one last sweep of the house, double-checking everything. In the bedroom, he placed Eleanor's note on her pillow. "I know, and you will see." Simple words that would haunt her as she realized the full extent of her husband's capabilities. Back at Mateo's, they continued monitoring the situation. Trevor had been denied bail, deemed a flight risk. Eleanor was under house arrest, her assets frozen pending investigation. "What now?" Mateo asked as evening fell. "Now we wait," Tom replied, watching the screens. "Let them stew in their cells tonight, wondering what tomorrow will bring. Let them realize their perfect plan didn't just fail. It destroyed everything they had." The news channels ran constant coverage of the scandal. Trevor's face, once a fixture in real estate ads, now appeared in mugshots. Eleanor's booking photo showed mascara streaked across her face, her expression one of fear and disbelief. "You know," Mateo said quietly, "they'll eventually figure out it was you. That their simple construction worker husband was something else entirely. By then," Tom said, standing up, stretching his tired muscles, "it won't matter. I'll be gone," he added, "and they'll have years in prison to think about their choices." The screens continued flashing with updates, more arrests, more revelations, the complete destruction of Trevor's criminal empire. Tom watched it all with cold satisfaction, knowing that this was just the end of Act 2. The real punishment, the full dismantling of their lives, was still to come. But that would be another chapter. For now, he had done what he set out to do. Chapter 7: The Fall of Trevor. Trevor Morrison sat in his office, watching his empire crumble on the wall of screens before him. Every news channel seemed to be reporting his downfall, detailing the murder plot, the corruption, and years of crimes, all laid bare in a matter of hours. "Sir?" His secretary's voice trembled through the intercom. "The board members are demanding an emergency meeting." Trevor didn't respond. His fingers raced across his phone screen as he tried to access his offshore accounts. "Access denied? Mr. Morrison?" A security guard appeared at his door. "The police are here with a warrant." Trevor's mask of confidence shattered. His hands trembled as he reached for the crystal decanter on his desk, pouring himself a generous glass of scotch. "Tell them I'll be right out," he said, his usual smooth voice cracking. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "How does it feel?" "Watching it all burn." Before he could respond, the police filed in. Detective Sarachan, a veteran of the White-Collar Crimes Division, stepped forward. "Trevor Morrison," she announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and numerous other charges we're still cataloging." "This is ridiculous." Trevor tried his usual charm. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Save it for your lawyer." Sarachan cut him off. "We have your hitman in custody, singing like a canary. Plus, hours of video and evidence that you so kindly broadcasted to the entire city." As they cuffed him and led him out, Trevor saw his employees filming him with their phones. The same people who had once idolized him now sneered at his disgrace. In the precinct holding cell, Trevor began to fully grasp the scale of his destruction. His family's lawyer came to visit, briefly informing him that the Morrison family was distancing themselves from the scandal. "Your father wants you to know your trust fund has been frozen," the lawyer said coldly. "The family won't post bail." "He can't do that." Trevor surged to his feet. "That money is mine." "Actually, he can. The trust has a morality clause. You've violated it spectacularly." Alone in his cell, Trevor paced restlessly. His phone calls went unanswered. Business partners, friends, even Eleanor, all ignored his desperate pleas. A guard appeared with more news. Your accounts have been flagged for investigation. The feds are involved now. Trevor slumped onto the hard bench. His mind raced through the events that had led him here. A simple plan to eliminate Eleanor's husband had spiraled into an avalanche, burying him instead. The next day, his court appearance only made things worse. The prosecutor laid out an irrefutable case, not just a murder plot, but years of fraud, bribes, and corruption. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, we have evidence that Mr. Morrison has been involved in multiple criminal enterprises. The attempted murder of Thomas Baker was just the latest in a long string of crimes. Trevor's expensive lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client maintains his innocence. Save it, the judge snapped. Bail is denied. Mr. Morrison is remanded to custody pending trial. Back in his cell, Trevor had more visitors, FBI agents, each with more questions about his business dealings. Each interview uncovered more charges, more crimes he had thought were buried. One agent mentioned casually, someone's been feeding us information for months. We've been building quite a case against you. Trevor's mind flashed to Baker, the quiet construction worker who'd somehow orchestrated his downfall. How had he not seen it? How had he underestimated him so completely? Then came the final blow, his family's response. They were cutting all ties. The Morrison name, built over generations, couldn't survive this scandal. The lawyer slid a letter through the bars. Trevor opened it with trembling hands. You have brought shame to our family, the letter read. Your actions have destroyed not just yourself, but threatened everything we've built. You are no longer a Morrison. Do not contact us again. That night in his cell, Trevor finally cracked. The weight of the realization hit him. He'd lost everything, his wealth, his status, his family name. All gone. And somewhere out there, Thomas Baker was watching it all unfold just as he'd planned. Chapter 8: The Ruin of Eleanor. Eleanor Baker stood in her new apartment, a far cry from the lavish home she'd shared with Tom. The walls were thin, the furniture cheap, and the neighborhood sketchy. Her designer clothes and expensive tastes seemed almost absurd in these surroundings. Her phone, once constantly buzzing with client calls and messages, now lay silent. The few times it did ring only brought bad news: another client firing her, another friend cutting ties, another bill she couldn't pay. She checked her bank accounts obsessively, watching her savings vanish. Her real estate license was suspended, pending investigation. No brokerage would touch her now. You've really made a mess of things, her lawyer had told her bluntly. The evidence against you is overwhelming. You're facing serious time unless you cooperate. Eleanor paced her cramped living room, haunted by the video that had destroyed her life. Her own voice, plotting Tom's murder, rehearsing her act as a grieving widow. The footage had gone viral, shared thousands of times. Her face, once featured in glamorous real estate ads, now appeared in news reports about betrayal and murder plots. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find a well-dressed man she didn't recognize. Mrs. Baker? He smiled politely. I'm here about your assets. My assets? She replied, confused. Yes. The forensic accountants have some questions about certain transactions between you and Mr. Morrison. Eleanor's stomach dropped. They were digging into everything now, unraveling the web of deceit she'd helped Trevor build. I don't know anything about that, she said, trying to close the door. Mrs. Baker? His foot blocked the doorway. Cooperation now might help your situation later. Reluctantly, she let him in. He spoke calmly as he outlined the evidence against her. Money laundering, fraud, conspiracy. The charges piled on, suffocating her. After he left, Eleanor collapsed onto her shabby couch. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. How's the view from rock bottom? In a fit of rage, she hurled the phone across the room, but the truth followed it. She had done this to herself. Her greed, her ambition, her betrayal of a good man had led her here. The next day brought more humiliation. At the grocery store, a former client spotted her. Isn't that the woman who tried to have her husband killed? The whispers followed her through the aisles, sharp and judgmental. Eleanor abandoned her cart and fled to her car, tears streaming down her face. She sat there, remembering Tom's quiet strength, his devotion, his simple happiness that she'd scorned. A knock on her window startled her. A man stood outside, his features somehow familiar yet strange. "Hello, Eleanor." She rolled down the window cautiously. "Do I know you?" "You could say that," he said, smiling. There was something in his expression that made her blood run cold. Recognition dawned slowly. Tom. But it wasn't quite Tom. His appearance was altered, and his manner different. He handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "Your fate." He turned to leave, then paused. "I know, and you will see." Inside the envelope, Eleanor found documents detailing every crime she'd committed with Trevor. Every fraudulent deal. Every betrayal. At the bottom was a note. "Justice comes in many forms." As she read through her own destruction, the full weight of what she had done hit her. Tom hadn't been just a simple construction worker. He had been something far more dangerous, and she had been foolish enough to betray him. Chapter 9: The New Dawn. Miles away from his old life, Tom sat in his workshop, restoring an antique table. Buster dozed nearby, gray around the muzzle but content. The small town suited them both, quiet, unassuming, far from the chaos they had left behind. His phone buzzed. It was Mateo, sending updates. Trevor's trial was proceeding, the evidence overwhelming. Eleanor had taken a plea deal, trading information for a lighter sentence. The Morrison family's empire was crumbling as investigators dug into decades of corruption. Tom set aside his tools, gently patting Buster's head before moving to the kitchen. His new home was modest but comfortable, paid for with Trevor's own money, a fitting irony. A knock at the door revealed his neighbor, Sarah, holding a pie. "Thought you might like some company for dinner." He accepted the pie with a warm smile. "Thanks. Would you like to stay?" Over dinner, they discussed normal things: the weather, local gossip, his furniture restoration business. Sarah knew him as James Wilson, a quiet widower who'd moved to town seeking peace. After she left, Tom sat on his porch, watching the sunset. His phone buzzed again. Another update from Mateo? Eleanor had been sentenced to 15 years. Trevor faced even longer. "Good boy," Tom muttered, scratching Buster's ears. "We did what needed doing," he added, reflecting on his new life. The peace he'd found. The simple pleasures he'd rediscovered. The betrayal had changed him, hardened him, but it hadn't broken him. In his study, a hidden safe contained evidence of his past life. Photos. Documents. Recordings. Insurance against any future threats. Tom had learned his lesson about trust, how to keep his guard up. But he'd also learned about justice, about the satisfaction of well-executed revenge. Eleanor and Trevor had thought him weak. Naive. They'd realized too late what he truly was. A predator playing at being prey. Tom poured himself a whiskey, remembering Eleanor's face when she finally recognized him, and Trevor's desperation as his empire crumbled. He felt no regret, no remorse. They had made their choices, and he made them pay. His new neighbors saw him as a friendly craftsman who kept to himself. They didn't need to know about the weapons cache in his basement, the surveillance equipment in his attic, or the escape plans ready to be put into action. Some habits couldn't be shaken. Some lessons shouldn't be forgotten. As night fell, Tom checked his security systems, a ritual from his past life that still brought comfort. Everything was quiet, secure. In his new town, under his new name, he'd found a different kind of peace. Not the peace of ignorance he'd had before, but the peace of a warrior who remained ready, who knew his own strength. The peace of a man who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. A man who had turned his enemies' plans against them and crafted their downfall. Buster stirred in his sleep, and Tom smiled. They'd survived, adapted, moved on. But they hadn't forgotten. They never would. Epilogue, 5 years later. Tom, now known as James Wilson to the residents of Cedar Grove, Montana, stood in his expanded workshop. What had started as a small furniture restoration business had grown into a respected establishment with 3 employees and a waiting list of clients eager for his craftsmanship. His hands moved steadily over a century-old dresser as his mind wandered to the past. Old Buster's collar hung on the wall, a reminder of his faithful companion who'd passed 2 years ago. Beside it was a framed article from the city paper, Morrison Empire Crumbles. Final assets seized. The article brought a cold smile to his face. Trevor Morrison had received 30 years without the possibility of parole. His attempt to bargain for a lighter sentence had backfired spectacularly when Tom, through carefully planted evidence, had exposed even more of his crimes. Tom's secure phone buzzed. Mateo's weekly update. Trevor's latest appeal was denied. Eleanor's up for parole next month, but the board's already decided to reject it. Thought you'd want to know. Tom sent back a simple acknowledgement. Eleanor had served 5 years of her 15-year sentence. The parole rejection would hit her hard. Another small payment for her betrayal. The workshop door chimed as Sarah entered, carrying their usual lunch. Over the years, their friendship had evolved into something more, though Tom maintained careful boundaries. She knew him only as James, the widowed craftsman with a talent for restoration and a preference for privacy. Brought your favorite, Sarah said, setting down 2 containers of homemade stew. How's the Anderson piece coming along? Tom wiped his hands clean. Almost finished. Just need to repair some inlay work. They ate together, talking about town matters and upcoming projects. Sarah ran the local real estate office, an irony that still amused Tom. Unlike Eleanor, Sarah's success stemmed from genuine skill and honest dealings. Did you see the news about that corruption case? Sarah asked between bites. The one from your old city? Tom nodded noncommittally. The Morrison case still made headlines occasionally, especially when new evidence surfaced about the extent of their criminal operations. Hard to believe people can be so cruel, Sarah continued. Planning to murder someone for insurance money? It's inhuman. Some people deserve what they get, Tom replied quietly. After lunch, Tom checked his security feeds, another habit he'd never broken. His new home was a fortress disguised as a modest ranch house, complete with escape routes, weapons caches, and surveillance systems that would impress even his old CIA handlers. His laptop held encrypted files tracking key players from his past. Trevor Morrison. Still in federal prison. Multiple appeals denied. Family fortune gone. Name disgraced. Recent prison reports showed Trevor had aged badly, his once charismatic persona replaced with bitter rage. Eleanor Baker. Prisoner number 24789. 5 years into her 15-year sentence. Multiple disciplinary incidents. Psychiatric evaluations noted severe depression and paranoid tendencies. She was still obsessed with identifying the man who'd visited her before her arrest. Marcus, the former hitman, was serving 20 years after turning state's evidence. His testimony had helped bury Trevor deeper, just as Tom had planned. Dave and Tony, other hitmen, had 12 years each. Both were model prisoners now, hoping for early release. They still had nightmares about the house that had turned into a trap. The Morrison family? Reduced to upper-middle-class status after the scandal. They salvaged some wealth but lost their social standing. Tom's carefully planted evidence had implicated several family members in Trevor's crimes. Mateo had done well for himself. Tom's share of Trevor's hidden accounts had set them both up comfortably. The tech expert now ran a legitimate cybersecurity firm, though he maintained the skills and contacts that had helped destroy the Morrisons. A notification popped up on Tom's secure screen. Eleanor had tried again to access her old email accounts. Even in prison, she was still searching for answers, still trying to understand how her simple husband had orchestrated her destruction. Tom opened a hidden folder containing surveillance photos from the prison. Eleanor's designer clothes and perfect makeup had been replaced by prison scrubs and hollow eyes. Her recent photos showed a woman haunted by her choices, broken by consequences she'd never anticipated. His phone buzzed again, a different kind of update. His remaining CIA contacts occasionally passed him information about potential threats. Old habits died hard, and Tom preferred staying informed. A former associate of Trevor's had been asking questions about Thomas Baker. "Want us to handle it?" Tom considered the offer. "Send me the details. I'll take care of it." The past had a way of rippling into the present. Tom had learned to watch for those ripples and deal with them before they became waves. Later that evening, he drove home to his ranch house on the outskirts of town. The property's isolation suited him. Clear lines of sight. No surprise approaches. The security system reported all clear as he entered. Sarah's car was parked in the driveway. She often came over for dinner, bringing warmth to his otherwise carefully maintained solitude. Tonight she'd prepared his kitchen for a cooking lesson she'd been insisting on. "You can't live on diner food forever," she teased, handing him an apron. Tom allowed himself to enjoy the moment while staying alert. Sarah was good company, honest and direct. But he'd learned his lesson about trust. His heart remained guarded, his true nature concealed. As they cooked, Tom's secure phone displayed another update. Eleanor had been in the prison infirmary again. Her latest breakdown included claims about her ex-husband being a government assassin. "Nobody believes her," Mateo's message noted. "Staff thinks she's delusional." Perfect cover. Tom served the dinner they'd prepared, listening to Sarah's stories about her day. She was everything Eleanor wasn't: genuine, content with simple pleasures, and honest to her core. "You're quiet tonight," Sarah said, lightly brushing his hand. "Just thinking about an old project," he replied. Once Sarah left, Tom checked his surveillance feeds one last time. His laptop flashed another news update. Trevor Morrison had been found unconscious in his cell, another failed attempt to end his suffering. Tom closed the laptop, poured himself a whiskey. The ice rattled as he stepped onto his back porch. The Montana night spread out before him, peaceful and expansive. He'd chosen this spot carefully, close enough to town for his business, far enough for security. The locals saw him as the quiet craftsman who found peace in his work. But only he knew about the hidden weapons room behind his wine cellar, the escape vehicles cleverly concealed, the multiple identities and accounts prepped for instant use. A shooting star passed overhead. Tom thought back to Eleanor's obsession with luxury, her insatiable need for status. Now she lay on a prison cot, her dreams of wealth replaced with nightmares of exposure and ruin. Trevor Morrison, once a man who could control boardrooms and bend politicians to his will, now shuffled through prison halls in shackles. His family name was tarnished, his empire in ruins, his arrogance replaced with impotent rage. Their muscle, Marcus, Dave, and Tony, had learned too late that they'd chosen the wrong target. Their prison sentences were the cost of underestimating a quiet man with hidden depths. Tom's phone buzzed one final time that night. A message from his CIA contact: "Morrison's former associate won't be asking any more questions." Tom responded with a brief thanks, then deleted the exchange. Sometimes, the past still needed tidying up, threads that had to be cut before they could tangle. Inside his study, Tom unlocked a hidden safe. Among the files and evidence was a single photograph of him in his Marine dress uniform, receiving a commendation that couldn't be discussed. The man in that photo had known who he was, never needing expensive suits or high status to prove his worth. Eleanor and Trevor had seen a simple construction worker, an easy target for their schemes. They'd learned too late that appearances were deceiving, and true strength often came disguised in humble packages. Sarah's cooking lesson had left dirty dishes in the sink. Tom washed them with the same care he gave to everything: thorough, focused, complete. The simple task reminded him of that last night in his old house, washing dishes while Eleanor plotted his death. His new life suited him. The furniture restoration business allowed him to work with his hands, to create rather than destroy. His relationship with Sarah provided companionship without vulnerability. The town gave him a sense of community without compromising his privacy. But beneath it all, he remained the predator who had turned the hunters into prey. His security systems, the weapons scattered throughout the house, the ever-updated escape plans, they were a testament to lessons learned and wisdom earned. Tomorrow, he'd open his workshop, restore beautiful things, share lunch with Sarah, and play the part of James Wilson, respected craftsman. He'd check his feeds, monitor any potential threats, and keep the vigilance that had saved him through wars and betrayals. The simple life he had once dreamed of had been a fantasy, naive and dangerous. This life, aware, prepared, and guarded, was real. He had found his peace, not in ignorance, but in strength, not in trust, but in control. In their cells, Eleanor and Trevor still woke from nightmares, haunted by the quiet man who had destroyed them so completely. They'd never understand that their betrayal had freed him, burned away his illusions and restored him to his true nature. Tom finished his whiskey. The ice had melted. In the distance, coyotes howled, predators announcing their presence to the night. He smiled, sensing a kinship with them. Some men wore expensive suits and spoke of power. Others stayed silent, watched, and waited for the right moment to strike. Eleanor had once accused him of being boring, predictable. Trevor had dismissed him as beneath notice, unworthy of respect. They had learned the price of such assumptions. Their prison sentences were only part of their punishment. The real torment was knowing that somewhere, the man they betrayed lived free, successful, and entirely beyond their reach. Tom locked up for the night, his routine precise and thorough. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to monitor, and new opportunities to safeguard his peace. He was ready, as he had always been. In the end, he had won more than revenge. He had reclaimed himself, shed the illusions of false contentment, embraced the warrior he had tried to deny. Eleanor's betrayal had been a gift, really. A brutal wake-up call that had restored him to his true strength. Let Trevor rage in his cell. Let Eleanor search hopelessly for answers. Let the world believe Thomas Baker had vanished. Here in Montana, James Wilson lived his carefully crafted life, aware, ready, at peace with both his power and solitude. The last light in his house flickered out. In the dark, a predator rested, vigilant even in repose, satisfied in the knowledge that justice had been served and lessons had been learned. Some debts could never be repaid. Some betrayals could never be forgiven. Some men would never be underestimated again. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen and I will see you there.